She sat alone at graduation. Then a voice from the crowd stood up. She walked into the gym in her graduation gown, looking for a seat, and realized no one had saved her one. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe if you love meaningful stories, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I really enjoy seeing where these stories travel. Emma kept her head low as she moved through the rows of folding chairs. Around her, students were hugging, laughing, taking selfies with parents and friends. Whole families filled the bleachers, holding signs, shouting names. People had brought flowers, balloons, homemade posters. Some kids were showing off cords and medals. Emma had none of that. She had her cap, her gown, and her phone. That was it. There was this loud, scattered kind of joy in the air, the kind that makes you feel even more alone when you're not part of it. She scanned the rows. Most of the seats had backpacks on them or were filled already. People called out across the aisles, "Hey, over here! Save me a spot! Where's Sarah?" Emma didn't hear her name once. She reached the last row and found an empty chair at the far end. No one had claimed it. It was pressed up near the wall, slightly away from the main cluster of students. She sat down and tried not to let it sting. She adjusted her gown and stared at the floor. It wasn't like she expected a big group of friends to wave her over. She knew what this day was going to be. She knew she'd be sitting alone. But knowing it and feeling it were two different things. She watched a group of girls across the aisle taking pictures. They all had matching shoes. They were throwing peace signs and laughing so hard one of them dropped her phone. Someone picked it up and said, "Emma, you got it?" Then another voice said, "Wait, not her. The other Emma." Not her. She turned her attention to the stage at the front of the gym. Teachers and school staff were moving around, getting ready. Someone tested the mic. Feedback squealed for a second. A few students clapped just to break the tension. Emma checked her phone. No new messages. She didn't expect any. Her parents couldn't come. Her mom's flight from Chicago got canceled that morning. Her dad had a job out of state. He sent a text that said, "Proud of you, kid," with a thumbs up emoji. She replied with a heart, then put her phone away. The gym was starting to fill. The buzz of the crowd grew louder. People shouted names up into the bleachers. Friends were waving signs. One guy walked past Emma holding 3 bouquets. He didn't even look in her direction. She stayed quiet. A teacher walked by handing out the graduation programs. He gave her a small smile and said, "Big day, huh?" Emma nodded. "Yeah." He moved on. She stared down at the folded sheet in her hands. Her name was there in tiny print. Alphabetical. No honors, no asterisk. Just her name. Emma Carlisle. She ran her finger over the letters like she needed to remind herself it was real. 4 years. All the days she showed up. All the homework she turned in. The tests she took. The classes she sat through, always near the back. The group projects where she did most of the work because no one really talked to her. The fire drills. The assemblies. The awkward small talk. The moments where she hoped someone might say, "Hey, come sit with us." All of it led here, to this folding chair, to this silence. The principal walked up to the podium. Everyone clapped. Emma clapped too, just so her hands would have something to do. She wasn't angry. Not really. Just tired. Tired of feeling like background noise, like a name on a list and nothing more. But even now, with the ceremony about to start and the gym buzzing with energy, a small part of her still hoped that maybe, just maybe, someone would notice her. Even just once. Emma had always been the kind of person who stayed quiet in a room full of noise. It wasn't because she had nothing to say. She just never figured out how to make people want to listen. In elementary school, she used to be part of a trio. Her and 2 girls, Maya and Sophie. They used to sit together at lunch and trade snacks, race to the swings at recess, braid each other's hair during indoor play. It wasn't flashy, but it felt safe. They belonged to each other in the way kids do when everything is simple. Then middle school happened. Suddenly there were lockers and cliques and birthday parties that involved sleepovers and social media. Emma didn't get invited to most of them. Maya started sitting with the theater group. Sophie joined the volleyball team. Emma stayed where she was, same lunch table, same routine. But now it was empty. No big fight, no dramatic moment, just space growing between people who used to be close. She tried to find new people. She sat with a girl named Olivia for 2 weeks until Olivia stopped saving her a seat. She joined the photography club for a month before realizing everyone else already had someone to partner with. She got used to walking through the halls with her earbuds in, music playing, face down. By 8th grade, she had a reputation, not for being weird or mean or anything negative. She was just quiet. The girl who was nice, but forgettable. The kind people said hi to in the hallway but didn't sit with at lunch. She got good at pretending it didn't matter. In class, she was the kind of student teachers liked. She listened. She took neat notes. She never interrupted or caused problems. But she wasn't the one people remembered when the year was over. She became the kind of person people went to when they needed help understanding a worksheet, but not someone they thought to text over the weekend. High school only made it worse. She thought maybe something would shift when she got to 9th grade. New school, new people. She tried to talk more in the first few weeks. She complimented someone's shirt. She asked to sit at a table that wasn't full. She joined a study group for biology. But the same pattern happened. People were nice. Smiles, nods, polite small talk. But they never pulled her in. She stopped expecting it. Instead, she found comfort in routines. She walked the same route to her classes every day. She ate lunch in the library sometimes, just to avoid the noise of the cafeteria. She read books. She scrolled. She listened to music in the hallways between classes and memorized lyrics like they were a second language. She wasn't miserable, but she wasn't really present either. There was a moment sophomore year when a substitute teacher handed back a quiz and paused at Emma's desk. "You're sharp," the woman said, glancing at the paper. "You should speak up more." Emma smiled politely and said, "Thanks." But in her head she thought, "Why?" No one's listening. There were people who probably would have said they liked Emma. If you asked around, most students would have said she was nice, smart, friendly even. But that's the thing about being quiet. People assume they know you when really, they don't know anything at all. No one knew her favorite books. No one knew she drew in her notebooks when she was bored. No one knew that she liked thunderstorms more than sunny days because they matched her energy better. She never gave them the chance, or maybe no one ever asked. By the time she was a senior, Emma had stopped wondering if things would change. She'd accepted her role, background character, the kind of person who showed up, got good grades, and left without making a dent. But even people who blend in want to be seen sometimes. And even Emma, with all her practiced quiet and lowered expectations, still had that small ache inside her. The kind that doesn't make noise, but never really goes away. Emma's name was in the yearbook, but she wondered if anyone would notice if it wasn't. It was her last week of high school when she picked up her copy. She waited until the line was short, avoided eye contact with the volunteers at the table, and flipped through the pages on her way out of the gym. The cover was shiny, blue and gold, with the school mascot printed across it. Everyone was signing each other's copies in the hallway, inside jokes, phone numbers, little drawings in black marker. Emma slid hers into her backpack, untouched. No one had asked to sign hers, and she hadn't asked anyone either. She got home that night and sat on her bed with the yearbook in her lap. She opened to the senior section and started scanning the photos. Some people had quotes under their names. Most were funny or song lyrics. She hadn't submitted one. She meant to, but she kept putting it off. Then the deadline passed, and she figured it didn't matter. Her picture was near the bottom of the page. Same straight hair, same tired half smile she always gave when someone pointed a camera at her. She looked at it for a long time. She didn't hate it. It just didn't feel like her. Not really. She flipped through the rest. Clubs, sports, homecoming, spirit week. She wasn't in any of them. Not in the background, not in group shots, not even in the crowd. It was like she had gone to school every day and still somehow disappeared. The last few pages were filled with candid photos. Best friends hugging in the hallway, seniors walking through the quad, notes scribbled beneath each one like, "That day was everything," or "Still laughing about this." She didn't recognize half the people, but it still made her feel like she had missed something important. She closed the book and stared at the wall. It's not like she hadn't tried. Her freshman year, she had considered joining the school newspaper. She even went to the interest meeting, sat in the back row, and listened. But everyone there already seemed to know each other. They shared jokes, finished each other's sentences. She didn't go back. She joined the art club for a few weeks in sophomore year. But she missed 2 meetings when she got sick. And when she came back, no one really noticed she'd been gone. She stopped trying after that. Instead, she focused on her classes. She kept her head down, turned things in on time, and walked the halls like she was just passing through. And it worked. Teachers liked her. She made honor roll every year. But when people talked about school memories, her name didn't come up. She overheard someone say once, "I can't believe high school is almost over." And someone else replied, "I know. It feels like it went by so fast." But for Emma, it didn't feel fast. It felt long. Like she'd been holding her breath for 4 years, waiting for it to end. She thought maybe something would click senior year. She thought maybe by the end, she'd find her place. People kept saying it was supposed to be the best year. But it didn't feel any different. Same halls, same faces, same quiet walks between periods. At lunch, she sat near the windows. That was her spot. No one else really used that table, so she stopped worrying about being asked to move. She'd eat slowly, scroll her phone, watch people come and go. There was one girl she talked to occasionally in English class, Tessa. She had bright eyes and a lot of opinions. They sat near each other for a semester. Sometimes they traded comments about the book they were reading or shared glances when the teacher went on a tangent. But once the seating chart changed, they stopped talking. Not because anything went wrong, just because that's how it always went. People passed through, but no one stayed. And Emma told herself that was fine. She told herself that showing up and fading out was just part of who she was. But deep down, she wondered what it would feel like if just one person looked at her and said, "You were part of this." Because right now, all she had was a yearbook full of strangers and a graduation ceremony where no one had saved her a seat. Emma almost didn't go. Graduation morning came early, but she had been awake long before the sun came up. Her alarm buzzed at 6. She turned it off without moving. Just lay there staring at the ceiling, the sky outside still that gray-blue color it turns before the light fully settles in. She had picked up her cap and gown the week before. It was still in the plastic packaging, untouched, hanging on the back of her bedroom door. She looked at it from her bed and felt nothing. Not excitement, not pride. Just a dull, heavy kind of hesitation. The plan had been simple. Show up, get through it, go home. But even that felt hard. Her mom had called the night before. She was stuck at the airport, delayed again. Something about weather and rerouted flights. Emma had told her it was fine. "It's just a ceremony," she said, trying to sound like she meant it. Her dad had texted around midnight. Still in Texas, new job, long hours. "I'll watch the live stream if I can," he wrote. Then he added a "love you" and a thumbs up emoji. Emma stared at that message for a long time before putting her phone face down on her desk. There was no celebration planned, no dinner reservation, no party. She hadn't even ordered graduation photos. It all felt like something that happened to other people. She sat up slowly and swung her legs over the edge of the bed. The house was quiet. Her younger brother was at a sleepover. Her stepdad had left early for work. It was just her. She walked to the mirror and looked at herself. Pale, tired eyes, hair she hadn't brushed yet. She pulled the cap and gown from the hanger and peeled off the plastic. It felt stiff, cheap, but real. She stood there holding it and thought, does this even matter? No one was going to be there for her. No one waiting in the crowd. No one saving her a seat. She thought about texting someone. Maybe Tessa. Just to say hi. Maybe ask if she was going to the ceremony. But she didn't. She stared at the empty message box for a moment, then closed it. She got dressed in silence, put on the gown, zipped it up slowly, adjusted the cap until it looked somewhat straight. Her reflection stared back at her, still unsure. In the kitchen, she poured cereal but didn't eat it. Her stomach was tight. By the time she walked out the door, the sun was up and the air already warm. She drove herself, parked far away, walked across the lot with her head down. Groups of students were already gathering in front of the school, posing for photos, holding bouquets. Emma walked past them like she wasn't part of it. Inside the gym, the noise was loud. Rows of chairs set up, people hugging, music playing softly through the speakers, teachers calling out directions. She stood near the back, looking for a place to sit, knowing she wouldn't find anyone waving her over. She found her row, sat down at the end, and stared straight ahead. She kept telling herself it didn't matter, but deep down, she knew it did. Not because of the ceremony, not because of the speech or the diploma or the photos, but because this was supposed to be a moment. One where you feel like you've done something worth celebrating. One where someone looks at you and says, "You made it." And Emma had made it. Every day she showed up, even when no one saw her. She was still here, even if no one else noticed. The gym filled fast. By the time the principal stepped up to the microphone, almost every seat in the crowd was taken. Parents leaned forward with phones in their hands. Friends waved signs with glitter and marker. A kid 2 rows ahead of Emma had a whole cheering section with matching t-shirts. Emma sat still in her chair at the edge of the back row. No one waved at her. No one called her name. She kept her hands folded in her lap and her eyes on the stage. She tried not to look around too much. The more she watched other people, the more out of place she felt. It wasn't that she was jealous. It was more like she felt separate from everything happening around her. Like she was sitting behind a glass wall, watching a life that looked almost like hers, but wasn't. A teacher handed out the graduation programs. Emma took one with a polite smile and opened it slowly, pretending to read even though she already knew what it said. Just names, rows and rows of names, her own printed on page 3, middle of the second column. Emma Carlisle. No awards, no distinctions, just her name. The principal started speaking. A welcome. A message about the future. About growth, change, resilience. People clapped at the right moments. Some students cheered when their classmates were mentioned in speeches. Emma stayed quiet. She thought about the others she had seen that morning. Groups of friends taking selfies, decorating their caps, hugging teachers goodbye. She thought about how many of them had people in the stands who came early, saved seats, brought flowers, how they would go out to dinner later, take pictures outside, maybe cry a little because it was the end of something big. Emma didn't have that. She wasn't bitter, just aware. She had come here by herself. She would leave by herself. She shifted slightly in her chair as the assistant principal stepped up to the mic and started reading names. One by one, students were called to the stage. One by one, they stood up, crossed the stage, and shook hands. Every single name was followed by cheering. Loud claps, shouts from the stands. Some people brought air horns. Emma flinched at those. She wondered if anyone in the crowd even knew she was there. As the line moved up, she felt the tension in her chest build. 4 students ahead of her, then 3, then 2. Someone behind her whispered, "Almost there," and laughed softly. Then it was her row. She stood up with the others, walked toward the stage, eyes fixed on the floor. Her hands felt cold. Her heart was beating faster than it should have. The student in front of her walked across. A cheer erupted from the bleachers. The announcer looked at the next name. Emma Carlisle. She took a step forward. And that's when it hit her. The silence. No one clapped. No one cheered. The gym, which had been bursting with sound just moments ago, held a small, empty pause, only a second or two, but it felt longer. Emma kept walking. She climbed the steps. She smiled at the principal. He smiled back, shook her hand, handed her the diploma cover. She said thank you out of habit. Her face was calm, her hands steady. On the outside, nothing cracked. But inside, something sank. Because in a gym full of people, her name had landed in silence. She walked off the stage and back to her seat. The row behind her was already getting ready to move. The cheering started back up again like nothing had happened. Emma sat down slowly. She knew this day would be quiet. But she hadn't expected it to feel like that. She stared at the diploma in her hands, fingers gripping the edge. She told herself to let it go. It didn't mean anything. But something inside her still whispered, someone should have clapped. She was almost back to her seat when it happened. Emma had just stepped off the stage and was walking down the ramp, still holding her diploma cover, when she heard it. A voice, loud and clear, from somewhere up in the crowd. "That's Emma! You did it, Emma!" She froze for half a second, not visibly, just inside. Her foot paused mid-step, and her chest tightened like someone had suddenly turned the volume back on in her world. There was a beat of confusion. She thought she imagined it. But then, right after the voice echoed through the gym, people started clapping. Not wild cheering, not anything over the top. Just real applause, loud enough to be heard, loud enough to feel. She looked up, scanning the crowd, unsure where it came from. Then she saw her. A girl near the middle row of the bleachers was standing. Short hair, bright dress, hands cupped around her mouth like she'd been waiting for her moment. She was smiling, waving. It took Emma a second to place her. Tessa, from English class. They hadn't spoken in over a year. Emma blinked, stunned, still walking, barely aware of the noise around her. She reached her seat and sat down, heart racing, hands still wrapped around the diploma like it might disappear. Tessa had shouted her name. In a room full of people, someone had said it out loud. Emma stared straight ahead as the next row of names continued. More clapping, more cheering. But it all sounded different now. Distant, less sharp. She couldn't stop thinking about that voice. Tessa didn't have to say anything. They hadn't been close. Just a few shared comments in class, a handful of partner assignments. They never sat together at lunch, never exchanged phone numbers. barely followed each other on social media. And still, she stood up. Still, she remembered. Emma wasn't sure how to process it. The feeling hit her hard, but quietly. A warmth in her chest, a tightness in her throat, like something that had been locked up inside her for a long time had finally cracked open. She wasn't crying, but she could feel something sitting just behind her eyes. When the last name was called and the room erupted in applause, she clapped too, just like everyone else. But this time, her hands didn't feel like they were just going through the motions. The final speech was short. The music played. Caps were tossed, though half the students held on to theirs for photos. Everyone stood and started moving toward the exits. Emma stayed in her seat a little longer. She didn't want to rush the moment. She looked down at the diploma in her lap. Same name, same paper, but it didn't feel so small anymore. When she finally stood up and moved toward the crowd, she kept looking around. Not for a ride, not for a celebration. For Tessa. And she found her. Right outside the gym doors, in the middle of the crowd, talking to someone and holding a bouquet. When she saw Emma walking toward her, her whole face lit up. "There you are," Tessa said, like they had known each other forever. Emma didn't know what to say. All she could get out was, "You shouted my name." "Yeah," Tessa said, like it was obvious. "You deserve to hear it." Emma blinked fast and looked down at her shoes. "I didn't think anyone would even notice I was there." Tessa didn't hesitate. "I noticed." It was just 2 words, but they landed with weight. Heavy, steady, real. Emma nodded slowly, then smiled, a real one, the kind that reaches the eyes. Tessa looked at her and added, "I always thought you were one of the kindest people in class. You were quiet, yeah, but people saw that. I did." Emma didn't know what to say to that. No one had ever said anything like it before. They stood there for another minute, and then Tessa hugged her. It wasn't long, just a few seconds, but it was enough. Enough to remind her that maybe all these years of being quiet hadn't made her invisible. She had been seen, and one voice had been enough to prove it. The crowd was starting to thin out, but Emma stayed where she was. She stood just outside the gym doors, the hum of laughter and conversation fading around her. Students were heading to cars, meeting up with families, taking group photos in front of the school sign. Everyone had somewhere to be. She had nowhere to rush to. Tessa had already slipped back into the crowd, carried away by hugs and pictures and celebration. But the space she left behind felt different now, like something in the air had shifted. Emma held her diploma tighter. She kept replaying the moment in her head, the way her name echoed through the gym, the way people clapped afterward, the way Tessa had stood up, without hesitation, and made her feel like she mattered. She hadn't realized how badly she needed that. Not just the shout, not just the cheer, but the recognition. Someone had noticed. All these years, she'd told herself it was fine. That not being seen didn't mean she didn't exist. That being quiet wasn't the same thing as being invisible. But deep down, part of her had wondered. Now, for the first time, that question had an answer. It only took one voice to change it. As she stood there, the school counselor walked by. He smiled and said, "Congratulations, Emma." She nodded and thanked him. A few minutes later, a classmate she barely knew said, "Hey, you looked really confident walking across the stage." Emma didn't know how to respond to that. She almost laughed, but instead she smiled and said, "Thanks." She didn't feel invisible anymore. Not because 100 people saw her, but because one did, and it was real. She started walking slowly toward the parking lot, letting the crowd pass her. On the way, She saw a group of students taking pictures in front of the big Class of 2025 banner. One of them caught her eye and waved her over. "Hey, do you want one?" the girl asked. "We've got extra." Emma hesitated. She was used to saying no, but this time she said yes. She walked over, took the photo, smiled. It felt simple and surprisingly easy. Nobody asked where she was going next. Nobody needed to. She didn't need to have the perfect plan, because for the first time, she wasn't measuring her worth against the noise. She got in her car and sat in the driver's seat with the door open, gown folded beside her, cap in her lap. The sun was warm on her arm. She opened her phone. No new messages. Then, after a moment, one came in. It was from Tessa. "Hey, you should be proud of yourself today. I really meant what I said. You were always one of the good ones." Emma stared at the message, unsure what to type back. She didn't need to say much. "Thank you," she replied. "That meant more than you know." She put her phone down. For years, Emma had been walking through school halls quietly, never wanting to cause a ripple, never expecting a moment like this. But sometimes, the smallest ripple is the one you remember forever. She didn't need a crowd to tell her she mattered. One person was enough. She looked out the windshield and let the moment sink in. She hadn't been forgotten. She had been seen. Emma woke up the next morning and didn't feel the same. It wasn't dramatic. Nothing about her had suddenly transformed. She still looked like herself, still brushed her hair the same way, still made toast with too much butter, and scrolled her phone out of habit. But something was different. There was a weight that wasn't there anymore. She sat at the kitchen table, diploma cover still on the counter where she left it the night before. For the first time, she looked at it without that quiet ache in her chest. It wasn't just a piece of paper now. It meant something. It meant she made it. And not just through high school. Through all the days when she felt invisible. Through the years of sitting alone at lunch, of being skipped over in conversations, of quietly watching other people form friendships that never quite reached her. She had made it through all of that. And at the end of it, someone stood up and said her name. That moment didn't fix everything, but it had changed something inside her. Later that day, she went into her room and opened a box she hadn't touched in a while. Inside were old notebooks, sketches, poems she never let anyone read. Things she had created quietly, convinced no one would ever care. She pulled out one of the journals and flipped through the pages. On one of them, she had written, "I wonder if anyone will remember me after this is over." She closed the book, but she didn't feel sad, because now she knew. Someone had. That week, Emma started responding to people's graduation posts online. She left comments she would have kept to herself before. She even posted a photo, not a posed one, just the picture someone had taken of her outside the gym. Cap in hand, half smile, sunlight on her face. She wrote, "Quiet kid, still made it." It was simple, but it was hers. A few people liked it. One comment said, "You were always cool, just quiet about it." She didn't know what that meant exactly, but she liked the sound of it. The next time she went to the grocery store, she saw someone from her class. A guy from her sophomore science lab. They made eye contact, and instead of looking away like she usually did, she gave a small wave. He waved back. That was it. Just a second. But it didn't feel small. Later, she found herself thinking about Tessa again. Not just the moment she yelled from the crowd, but all the moments before that. How someone she barely knew had still seen her, remembered her, chose to speak up. Emma had spent so long thinking no one noticed, but now she realized it wasn't that no one ever had. It was that she hadn't let herself believe it. Now she did. She started writing again. Not because she needed an outlet, but because she had something she wanted to say. Something real. She wasn't trying to be someone new. She was just allowing herself to be seen. Even if it was one person at a time. Even if it started with one voice. Emma didn't suddenly become outgoing. She didn't join a club or throw a party. That wasn't her. But she stood straighter now. She answered messages instead of ignoring them. She spoke when she had something to say, even if it was short. Because now, she believed someone might actually want to hear it. And maybe, just maybe, she could be that voice for someone else one day. The one that stands up. The one that says a name out loud. The one that makes someone feel like they matter. It had been a few months since graduation, but Emma still remembered the exact sound of her name being called, and the silence that followed. And then, just as clearly, she remembered the voice that broke it. She thought about that moment more often than she expected to, not because she was holding on to the pain, but because of how quickly it shifted into something else. Something real. Something that stayed. That one voice had changed the way she looked at everything that came before. She didn't suddenly become the center of attention after that day. Most of the people from high school moved on, just like she did. There were no reunion texts or unexpected friend groups. But none of that mattered now, because Emma didn't need a crowd to feel seen anymore. All it took was one person to remind her that she'd been seen all along. She kept in touch with Tessa, not constantly, but enough. A message here and there, a funny meme, a check-in. They met for coffee once during the summer. It wasn't a big emotional thing. They just talked about books, college plans, music. Emma left that day feeling lighter, and she realized something important. She hadn't needed a rescue. She wasn't waiting for someone to save her. She just needed proof that she mattered to someone. And she got that. That one voice, at just the right time, reminded her of something she had forgotten somewhere along the way. Being quiet doesn't mean you're not worth hearing. You don't need a dozen people cheering for you to believe you did something meaningful. One person is enough. Sometimes more than enough. As fall came, she started college classes at the local campus. It was small, unfamiliar, but not intimidating. Not like it might have felt a year ago. She took a seat near the middle on the first day. Not at the back, not tucked in the corner. It wasn't about being noticed. It was just a choice. She didn't feel like hiding anymore. When the professor asked people to introduce themselves, she spoke clearly. "Emma," she said, "creative writing major." It was just 2 words, but they felt solid. After class, someone complimented the notebook she was using, covered in little hand-drawn stars. Emma said thank you. They started talking. Nothing big. But it didn't end awkwardly. And for once she didn't replay the conversation in her head, wondering if she said the wrong thing. Because she didn't need to prove anything. She already knew who she was. Emma didn't forget the years that came before, the loneliness, the silence, the ache of not being chosen. She carried them with her, but not like a burden, more like a quiet strength, a reminder of what it meant to notice someone and what it meant to be noticed. And one day she did something small that meant more than it looked. She was walking across campus and saw a girl sitting alone outside the library, sketchbook in her lap, eyes on the ground while everyone else walked by. Emma didn't know her name, didn't know her story, but something felt familiar. So she walked over. She smiled. And she said, "Hey, that's a cool drawing." The girl looked up, surprised, then smiled back. That was it. Just a moment. But Emma knew what that moment could mean. Because once, Someone had stood up in a crowded room and shouted her name like it mattered. And it did. And now, she was ready to be that voice for someone else. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy meaningful stories like this, we'd love to have you as a subscriber.